Welcome to the Salty Pastor Podcast. I am Douglas Peak, and I am your Salty Pastor. I'm here to help coach you up in your faith. And right now, we are digging a little bit deeper past the headlines and into the ideologies behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now, I have some questions today, and I want to ask these questions in a way that helps you think about what went on and what happened from a different perspective. And the reason I want to do that is because I think it's really important to dig a little bit deeper and really figure out a intentional, disciplined, compassionate, strong, loving response. And I think it's very important. I wrote a email blog that went out on Monday talking about, well, what exactly is love? And when you read the biblical definition of love, it's totally different than the world's definition of love. And so the first thing we have to think about is that if Christianity is based on love, how do you respond in a loving way? How do you do that? What goes on? What happens? How does that work? Well, first and foremost, you have to get a really good definition of love, don't you? Don't you have to figure out, well, what is really love? In the world today, we tend to think that love is all about, acceptance, and it's all about tolerance. It's all about erotica. Whenever we see something nice with flowers, we go, oh, that's love. Or when we see something really nice, that's love. Rarely do you see a parent struggling with how to keep their cool when their toddler is throwing a fit in the aisle at Walmart, and trying to discipline that child is an act of love. But it is. It is rarely pointed out that a parent that disciplines a child for misbehaving as an act of love, but it is. It's never reported that when a group of coworkers point out that a fellow coworker is stealing from the company as an act of love, but it is. It's almost never, maybe on occasion, but it just doesn't seem to me in media today where it shows fathers who stick around, show up, lead and guide as an act of love. It's construed as toxic masculinity, but it is love. For a man to stay and to sacrifice and to continue to lead and take the hits and provide, that's an act of love. So what is love? And if you love your country, and if you love righteousness, and you love what's right, then standing strong in the face of things that are unjust, wrong, and evil is actually an act of love. And this is why G.K. Chesterton said that real soldiers that sign up to fight, never fight because of hatred of what's in front of them, but because of their love for what is behind them. And so the greatest act of love is to defend. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, when I respond in love, how do I respond in a way that is strong, protective, and defensive of that which I should be defending? So that's the first thing I want you to think about, is I want you to ask yourself, okay, what exactly is love, and how is love motivating my response? Because my next question is even bigger than that. And you better understand your response in love if you're going to be able to address this question. And that is simply this: what is evil? What is evil? Do you actually know what is evil? Now, I think it's pretty realistic to simply say, hey, I know evil when I see it. Well, that is true, but sometimes you don't know evil when you see it. The scriptures say that Satan himself, Lucifer, presents himself as an angel of light. So on some occasions, the Pied Piper can look good, but that doesn't mean the Pied Piper is good, right? So we have to understand that, well, sometimes it might look good, but it turns out to be evil in the long run. Like I would say probably the biggest example of this is addiction, right? When people start using, they're using because it helps them feel better and it helps them escape, which is a good thing. And you ask yourself, if it feels so right, how could it be wrong? Well, once you're locked in addiction, guess what? You find out how evil and controlling it really is. So the first question is, what is evil? Can an ideology be evil? Well, I think that we can say the answer to that is yes, it can. It can. When you have an ideology that dehumanizes other human beings, you can say that that is an evil ideology. When you have an ideology that says, hey, it's okay to assassinate people that you disagree with and cheer that is a victory, particularly when they are a fellow citizen, I'd have to say that that ideology is evil. It's not just wrong, but it's evil. Now, that leads me to the next question, and that is this. Is it wrong to call something evil? Right? There's a saying that's been out for a long time that I always thought was a little bit intriguing, and it's like, well, the problem with politics today is that your basic Republican thinks that a Democrat and even a far left progressive is simply wrong. Democrats, basic liberal Democrats, left of center, look at their Republican counterparts and say, yeah, you're just wrong. You're just wrong on that. But the far left, right, looks at Republicans and even moderate Democrats as evil. That's right. They don't see them as just wrong. They see them as evil. And therefore, it's justifiable in eradicating them, canceling them, and even celebrating their assassination. So is it wrong to call something evil back? It's like, well, we just want to say that people are wrong. Well, I think it's really important to understand, number one, it's not wrong to call something evil. And number two, the reason you need to understand and identify what is evil and what is not evil is so, as the writer of Hebrews says, you can train up your senses to discern good from evil, right? So, okay, this is good. That's evil. Now, why do you want to be able to train your senses to do that? Well, because if somebody's wrong, you approach them from a different strategy than from someone who's evil, right? Now, even though our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and principalities of this present darkness, we have to understand that human beings pick up these ideologies, these things, these beliefs from the principalities of this present darkness and propagate them. And when people do that, you have to say, look, I can't just say my battle's against flesh and blood. I need to use flesh and blood to stop you from being evil. And that makes absolute 100% perfect sense to me. It really does. It makes perfect sense to me. And so I think that the biggest thing to do is say, look, it's not wrong to call things evil. It's important to categorize them and understand them. Now, that leads me to the final question here on the Salty Pastor, and that is for this podcast, and that is, when you recognize something as evil, what should you do about it? And this is where your definition of love comes into play, right? It really comes into play. Now, I want to read a couple passages of scripture for you, and I want you to get kind of a sense of what's happening out there, okay? And the first one I want to read to you is both passages, before I start reading them, are letters that the apostle Paul wrote to his disciple, the young man he mentored, named Timothy. And he wrote him two letters called 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, and they're part of what is commonly known as the pastoral epistles, meaning the pastoral letters. And these are the last things that Paul ever wrote. And it's also important to note from a historical standpoint that Timothy is the one who gathered all of Paul's letters together and then the Gospels and assembled in the first century the earliest manuscripts for what we know as the New Testament today. So Timothy gets the credit for really helping get the library, otherwise known as the Bible, of the New Testament together and preserved. So phenomenal thing that he did. Well, in Paul's first letter to him, he writes the following words, okay? He says in chapter 4, verse 1, he says, look, Timothy, the Spirit, meaning the Holy Spirit, clearly says that in later times, so I guess you could say we are in later times, some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. Such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a branding iron or hot ironing. And here's how we know that these doctrines are deceiving. They forbid people to marry. They order them to abstain from certain foods, which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and who know the truth. For everything God created is good. Nothing is to be rejected if it is to be received with thanksgiving, because it is consecrated by the word of God and prayer. So what's really interesting is he says, how do you know that people listen to deceiving spirits? Well, it says these things that are taught by demons. He says, well, first and foremost, you look at hypocrisy. And then second of all, you look for people who forbid people to marry and order them to abstain from certain foods, which is a ceremonial religious expression. So one of the things that I think is important to understand is that doctrines and ideologies can be evil. They can be taught or influenced by demons that simply pervert our understanding of the basic things like love, right? Like love. And that is this ideology through transgenderism and queerness about how love is love. Okay, well, what does that mean? I was always taught that you can never use the word you're trying to define in the sentence that you use to define it. You can't do that because it makes absolutely no sense. Well, in the queer theory and in the transgender ideology, the whole notion of love is that you must affirm whatever identity I choose to have within myself. So there's no desire to have any defense of what's true or false. Therefore, to say that that is love is to be hypocritical. That's not love. That is not love at all. Love requires truth. Love requires grace. If you divide them one from the other, you no longer have love. You only have hypocrisy. So that's really important to understand, is what is loving in the response, because in the end times, there will be people who abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits. Today, there's a movement within Christianity called progressive Christianity. Now, it's really interesting because adjectives are designed to do something, right? They're designed to change the meaning of the noun, right? So every time you use an adjective, you do so intentionally for the sole purpose of changing the meaning of the noun with which you are referencing. So it's not enough to be a Christian. You must be a progressive Christian. And what that basically means is that you have a very progressive ideology interwoven with your Christianity. Unfortunately, this is hypocrisy. That's right. You either are simply a Christian or you're not. Christian in its purest form simply means one who seeks to follow Jesus. That's right. You're not asking Jesus to be your political envoy and mentor. You're not using Jesus to advance an earthly agenda. You are simply saying, my goal is to follow Jesus. And if you're following Jesus and you're following his definition of love and faith and hope, you're going to find it affecting your political perspective in a dramatic way. You're also going to find that you're a better person. And so that's really important to understand, is that our goal is to follow Jesus in its most pure form, not to put adjectives in front of Christian or love or anything else and try to redefine it with a really cute adjective, okay? Now, I want to flip over to the second book of Timothy, and I want to read a couple things to you that are really, really interesting, okay? And I want to start with chapter 3, verse 1. He goes, "Now I want you to realize this, that in the last days, difficult times will come." And I think it's safe to say that we are facing very difficult times right now in our own country. He says, "Men will be lovers of self." Now, what's really interesting today is that I'm doing research for a book called Desperado. It's a book for men and why men are going their own way. And so I'm really talking about, well, why is it so hard for men and women to have relationships with each other anymore? Women are decrying available men who want to have a commitment. Men are decrying the kind of quality of Western women. And boy, they do not see eye to eye. As a matter of fact, the stats out now just are talking about how the political leanings of young men in America and the political leanings of females or young women in America have never been more further apart than ever before. Isn't that interesting? So there's a lot of struggle going on for young people finding love. And that bothers me because I want more love going on. I want more people to find love, fall in love, get married, and have kids. Because the bottom line is that is the greatest thing you'll ever do in your life. And if you want your life to have meaning, if you want your life to have purpose, it doesn't matter how hard it is, it doesn't matter how difficult it is, you should get married, stay married, and have kids. You know, that is going to help you become a better person. That's going to help you have more joy in life. It's going to have more meaning in life. I'll tell you what, it's the greatest thing ever. So I want people to fall in love. I want them to get married. I want them to have kids. I really, really do. So I'm researching this book. And one of the things that I find is that the whole thing that young men and even older men who don't want to get married, don't want anything to do with women, is they say that women are narcissists. They're so selfish. They have this huge list of all these qualities that they require before they'll even go out with you, but they don't have any of those expectations for themselves. They want everything and offer nothing. And so, oh, wow, that's a really severe criticism. Now, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's what I'm hearing, right? Then I go over to the women, right? And they go, well, men are so selfish. All they do is love themselves. They just care about themselves and what they want. They're not interested in me or what I want or anything else. Who wants a relationship with a narcissist? And you look at people getting divorced. It says, I was married to a narcissist. I'll tell you what, based on what people are saying out there, everybody's a narcissist. Well, I guess at some level that might be a little true, but that's neither here nor there today. In the end times, Paul says, men will become lovers of self. We're going to have more narcissism, not less. And what's happening is our society is creating more narcissism. You wonder where the selfishness and self-centeredness is coming from among young people? It comes from how they were raised in our culture. And they've been predominantly influenced and raised by progressive ideology in the public and private educational system. If you want to go to a progressive church of today, enroll in a university, because that's the church of progressive leftist Marxist ideology, okay? Number 2, they will be lovers of money. They will be boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, and haters of good. They will be treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers, holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. Avoid people like this. And that's what's going on, particularly in this ideology. Since Charlie Kirk was assassinated on September 10th, there have been 24 mass shootings occurring in the United States of America, according to the Gun Violence Archive. All right. And this means 4+ people shot, not including the shooter. So since September 10th, there have been 24 mass shooting incidents since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. It says events widely reported or treated as domestic or targeted attacks here in the United States. Some of the most specific, this is according to ChatGPT, is that there's the Dallas ICE facility sniper attack, the Grand Blanc, Michigan church attack, which happened on the 28th, and they are both being investigated as targeted acts. Now, it's really quite amazing what is happening. There's another study that just came out that shows that there's been a massive increase in left-wing violence. It's always been this way. One of the things that I've heard over and over again, well, there's a thing on there that says, on the Department of Justice website, that said that there's more violence on the right than there is on the left. But this was completely discredited. It's been taken down. It was commissioned by a guy and led by a guy who's a member of Antifa. And so what they would do is they would say, well, if we can't specifically nail down any motive, we're going to call it right-wing violence. And so you take that out, and what you find is that in the last 5 years, there have been over 28,000 acts of violence from the left. And there's been less than 50 from the right. That's just, I mean, the comparison here is, it's not, it happens on both sides kind of a thing. It's just simply not. Now, is that because I'm trying to say you should be Republican? No, I don't care who you vote for. Is it to say you should be more conservative in your ideology? No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying, though, is that if you are a left of center Democrat, if you're a Republican, maybe a super conservative Republican, maybe you're not even Republican, you're just conservative, maybe you're an independent who leans left, it doesn't matter. Everyone should agree that a 28,000 to 50 comparison of acts of violence from the far left needs to be taken seriously. And we need to realize where all of these evil acts are coming from. They are produced by a specific ideology. You know, another thing that must be pointed out that nobody wants to take account of, and that is that right now Islam is propagating some of the biggest genocides that we've ever known. There have been over 100,000 confirmed Christians killed in northern Nigeria by the Fulani herdsmen. I've talked about this over and over again. Nobody mentions it. As a matter of fact, though, just as a side note, Bill Maher brought it up on his show. And I'm like, how in the world is Bill Maher starting to agree with me more and more in stuff he's saying? My goodness, if that's not proof there's a God, I don't know what is. I thought that was kind of funny. But the issue is that Islam is doing these things. They're doing it in Pakistan. They're doing it in Azerbaijan. They're doing it. There was 150,000 Armenians that had lived in this specific valley for probably 800 years. That's 8 centuries they have lived there. And they are being pushed out by Islamicists. And so this notion that Islam, macro Islam, is a religion of peace is ridiculous. It just doesn't bear to be a factual statement. Now, you may know a Muslim. I know people who are Muslim who are really nice people. And I'm like, I'm so thankful that they're nice. But if you go to places where they get a 30 to 40% majority, guess what? They're not so nice anymore. This is right now in Dearborn, Michigan. You got to go. I mean, a Christian pastor stood up in a council meeting and simply said, hey, you're naming a street after a proven terrorists that support violence against people. And I don't want this street in my city named. And the mayor said, well, you're not welcome here. You know, you're not welcome here at all. You know that Dearborn, Michigan City Council has been sued numerous times. They always lose because they are hostile to Christians and Jews. And yet no one talks about it. It's never in the news. No one ever does anything about it here in the United States of America. And that's the other thing, is that Paul wrote these things to highlight the fact that we need to be aware of them. We need to point them out. We need to be willing to call them evil, okay? He says, because what you will have is you will have people who say that what they're doing is godliness, but they've denied the power of God. And so that's what's so interesting. I have heard more and more statements about what is Christian and not Christian. And what's interesting to me is people are upside down crazy. They are inverting things constantly. I mean, what they say is Christian has nothing to do with Christianity. And, it's like, okay, if we're going to remove people who are here illegally and they've committed crimes against other people, that's not very Christian because we're supposed to welcome the immigrant. I'm like, where in the world do you get that? That has nothing to do with Christianity. That has to do with justice, and Christianity is very big on justice because the bottom line is that Christianity is very, very committed to the fact that if you coddle, if you forgive, or you let off the perpetrator of a crime, what you're doing is you're victimizing the victim all over again. You're victimizing society. And that is ridiculous. Society's not to blame for a criminal's activity. The criminal is to blame, and the criminal must bear the consequence. Okay, that's where I'm going to cut off today on the Salty Pastor because I'm feeling extra salty. If you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see I'm wearing my extra salty shirt. And I'm going to continue to dig into this a little bit more because I think we're at a really seminal point, meaning a transitional point in our country today. And that is our Democrats and Republicans, our independents that lean left and lean right, are they going to tolerate political violence? Are they going to tolerate evil in its midst? Are they going to put up with it? Or are we going to finally do something about it? And then if there's evil on the right, if there's a fascism on the right and white supremacy that's going around and committing acts of violence, well, we're going to do something about that as well. We need to become a society that's serious about good versus evil. I hope you join me as we dig deeper. Until then, signing off, and remember, what you believe is one of the most important things about you.